My name's Don Popejoy, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. By God's grace, sponsorship, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been sober since the 21st day of February, 1980. My home group is the Primary Purpose Group on Marco Island, Florida. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude to have been a part of this weekend. I don't think I have the words to express how much I appreciate, how honored and privileged I am to have spent these days here with all of you. I want to thank Mike and the committee for inviting us. I want to thank Eric for being our host and showing us all the grace and courtesy. I want to thank all the speakers. My God, these speakers have just grabbed my heart, and I know that they have yours too, and I want to thank you. Over the years, at times I've had the privilege of serving on conference committees like this, not this large, but like this. So I know something about the commitment and the hours of work and meetings and the effort that goes in to bringing us this kind of a energy-driven, spirit-filled conference. I want to thank all of you on the committee, all of you that have volunteered, all of these 73 groups that have provided our hospitality. I want to thank each and every one of you. And now we're about to wrap this thing up, and it's my responsibility to share with you, in a general way, what I used to be like and what happened to me and what I am like today. And really, my story is the story of all the previous 7 speakers. You know, what we've all really heard, me and all of you have heard this weekend from each of these speakers, even though their stories are totally different, we've heard the same message. And what the message is that I've heard is that because of this simple program, the theme of your conference, our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives, and we know this with absolute certainty in a way that is indeed miraculous. And what a glorious message of recovery it's been this weekend. Like all and many of I think all of the speakers have really said, what I used to be like was that there was something missing inside of me. I used to kind of struggle. It was easy for me to tell about what my behavior used to be like, but it was more difficult for me to find words to express to you what I was really like, what I felt like inside. I probably, before I get into this, should clear up a little bit this confusing question of my geography. If you look in your program, it says I'm from Wichita, Kansas. If you read my name badge, it says I'm from Naples, Florida. My home group is on Marco Island, Florida, and we're living today at the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. If you're wondering if I know where in the hell I'm from, you got a good question, you know. I got sober in a little town out in southwestern Kansas by the name of Ulysses, and we lived there for a long time. I sold my business in 1996 to some folks in Wichita, and we moved there and lived there for 8 years, and that was our home and my home group. While we were there, we got a little condominium on a lake in the Ozarks, and we'd spend some weekends down there. In December, we made the decision to sell our house in Wichita. I'd quit working at the end of November. We bought a place in Naples, Florida, and moved down there. And then we discovered that summers are not friendly in South Florida because of hurricanes. So we decided we'd keep the place and at the Lake of the Ozarks, and for safety's sake, go up there while the hurricanes are blowing through our new home. So that's the story of my geography. A couple of years ago, Susan had taken some of her girlfriends down to the lake condo to play golf, and after they left, I went down there, and they had obviously put together a jigsaw picture puzzle. It must have rained, so they couldn't play golf. And the very center piece of this puzzle was gone. And I asked Susan, I said, where's the middle of the rest of the puzzle? And she said, the piece in the middle is missing. And I thought, my God, that's what I used to be like. That's exactly what I used to be like. I had this piece missing in the puzzle of my life. The summer between my sophomore and junior year in high school, I kind of went on a quest looking for the missing piece, and I had 3 first-time experiences that convinced me that I might have found it. In about March of that year, my flight instructor allowed me to fly an airplane by myself for the first time, and as I was cruising around over that flat Kansas countryside and looking at the clouds and the horizon, and I thought, God, it can't get any better than this. This has got to be what I've been missing all my life. And then about the end of the school year, one of the girls in the junior class invited me to go to the junior-senior prom. And my dad let me take his '54 Ford Coupe. And I picked her up and we went to the prom, and she lived out in the country. And sometime between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning on a dirt road in Grant County, Kansas, in the back seat of my dad's Ford Coupe, I was absolutely certain that I'd found the missing piece of my life. Then sometime in July of that year, my folks were leaving town and going to Colorado fishing, and I asked them if I could use the coupe to take some of my buddies to the drive-in theater. And with some misgivings, he allowed me to do that, and I picked up 3 of my friends, and we went out, and we were sitting by the drive-in movie, and one of them in the back seat, guess what it said, guess what I got? And we all said, what? And he said, I got a pint of tequila. Now, the home that I grew up in knew all the agony and the pain and the heartache and the broken promises and the broken hearts of a home with active alcoholism because of my dad's drinking. And I had promised myself as a young boy that I would never drink and that I would never subject the people that I loved and that loved me to the grief of alcoholism that we experienced in our home. And one of these guys took the lid off the bottle, and the first one took a drink and handed it to the guy sitting to the right of me, and he took a drink. And without one single thought of any of that, I put that bottle in my mouth and took the biggest swallow I could take. And I thought I was going to die. It burned and it hurt, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. And I passed it to the back seat. And about 30 seconds later, I had one thought that overpowered every other thought I had for the next 25 years of my life. And that thought was that I hope to God there's some of that stuff left when it gets back around to me. I vaguely remember that night, the rest of that night. When I came to the next morning, I looked out the window of my bedroom and saw that the back end of my dad's car was all bashed in, folded up like an accordion. And when they came home, I started a pattern of my life that was continued till I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I got drunk. When I drink, the same thing happened over and over again. I drank until there wasn't anything more to drink, until I blacked out or I passed out. I got into trouble, and then I had to lie and cover up my way out of the jam that I was in. And that became the story of my life. For a long time, those experiences that I had as a teenager more or less filled this empty hole in the middle of me. They didn't ever fit quite right. And you know how you do when you're putting together a jigsaw picture puzzle. You find a piece and you think it's right and you try to push it down in and squeeze it and jam it, and it doesn't quite fit. But you keep working at it because you don't have another piece to put in there yet. And that's the way I was with all these things. Now, I tried all kinds of stuff to fill in the missing piece in my life, not just airplanes and sex and booze. I'd try anything for a while, hoping that maybe it was gonna fill up what was missing in me. I mean, I'm a bar drinker, and I like to drink in bars where the smoke's so thick you can cut it with a knife, and where you can hear those ice cubes tinkling in the glasses, where there's a little postage square sized dance floor in the back of the room. There's a country and western band playing sad music, and people are polishing their belt buckles together. That's my kind of a place. Some of you know about those places. And I'd go to those places, and I'd have these wonderful fantasies about how closing time was going to work out for me. And they never came true. My closing times were a disaster. I mean, the simple truth is, they don't like to go home with guys that are puking on their boots. That's all there is to it. But I thought there's got to be something wrong. There's got to be some reason why this isn't working out. And you need to know one other thing about me. I've been about this bald-headed since I was in my mid-20s. And here it is in the 1970s, I'm a child of the 50s as opposed to a lot of your other speakers who are a child of the 60s, so I vicariously enjoyed their 60s right along with them, though, I'll tell you that. And I decided, after giving this matter some thought, that the reason my closing time fantasies were a dismal failure was because I was prematurely bald-headed. And I thought I need to do something to address this problem. So I lived in this little town of Ulysses out in southwest Kansas, and I heard about a doctor in Wichita. And so I got in my little single-engine airplane and made an appointment with him, and I flew down to Wichita to meet him. I parked in front of a liquor store and a barber shop, walked across the street, walked upstairs to meet this doctor, and he explained to me that for $5,000, he could cut 50 holes in rows in the top of my head. And he could cut 50 plugs of hair out of the back of my neck. And that he could take these plugs of hair and transplant them into these holes that he had cut in the top of my head. And if we got lucky, he could grow me about 10 cornrows of hair. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Not much." He said, "Why?" And I said, "Good grief. $5,000, this is in 1970. I said, $5,000 is a ridiculous amount of money. I'm not into pain." And I looked at him and I said, "And you're more bald-headed than I am. If this works so good, why don't you do it yourself?" I paid him for my appointment, and I walked over to get first I went into the liquor store to get a fifth, because there was one of these, my kind of places was down, I knew it was down on South Seneca in Wichita. And I looked up, and the easier, softer way just jumped right out and grabbed me. I was parked in front of this barber shop, but it was kind of a specialty barber shop. He had about 10 styrofoam models of men's heads in the window, and on each of these heads there was a full head of hair. It was a man's wig store. And I walked in there and gave him $300 or $400, and I walked out a couple hours later looking exactly like my hero, Glenn Campbell. I had a full head of hair, a pompadour that went from here to here. I was ready to go do the boogaloo. And I got in my car with my fifth of J&B and headed down to the joint and started drinking and listening to the music. And I, this was a long time ago. But here was the drill. You got the rug and you got the shiny bald head. So the challenge is, how are you going to get the wig to stick on top of the shiny bald head? What they do, they sell you a roll of double-sided adhesive tape. And you cut this tape into little 1-inch strips, and you pull the backing off of one side, and you stick that around the inside perimeter of the hairpiece, And then you pull the backing off the other side. Now you got one sticky side down and one sticky side up, and you stick that thing on the top of your head and comb it in, and you're ready to go do it. And I think that works pretty well for non-alcoholic drinkers. I mean, I don't know about you. What happens to me when I drink Mr. Justerini and Brooks Magic Elixir? Some real predictable things are going to happen. I mean, I pour that stuff down my throat, and it burns for a little bit, and then it starts doing its magic. And I become transformed. I morph into another human being. I mean, this guy that was shy and uncomfortable around girls and didn't think he could dance, I'm suddenly the most social giant of the 70s, you know. I can talk, I can do anything, I can dance, and man, in about an hour and a half, that booze starts coming out the top of my head in the form of perspiration. Now, it's a bright audience. Now, adhesive tape abhors perspiration. So, you know, what happened? Here I am. I'm dancing like crazy. I'm drinking that J&B scotch. My head starts to sweat. The tape turns loose, and the rug turns around sideways on the top of my head. And it's hard to be a cool operator. It's hard to impress them in a 70s single joint, you know, with the part on your head running from ear to ear. Pompadours hanging down over your right earlobe. Closing time, still a disaster. I parted company with that wig. 2 or 3 years later, I was building an airport in Alamosa, Colorado, and I'd been out drinking. I made it back to the motel room, and this time it hadn't come completely off. One side was still stuck, and it was just hanging over here. I had that half scalp look. Real hip, slick, and cool, you know. I got it hanging over here. And all of a sudden, it was time for my nightly oblations before the throne of American Standard. I went into the bathroom, got down on my knees, my head went down, the stuff came up, and the other 3 pieces of tape turned loose, and the rug fell right in there with the rest of it. I might have been accurately labeled as the town drunk, but I sure as hell wasn't the village idiot. I didn't fish it out, you know. I hit the silver handle and waved goodbye to the whole mess. Went to work the next day and said, now you've got the real me. And I went back to the only thing that really ever almost perfectly filled the hole, and that was booze. Alcohol and alcoholism just put a ring through my nose and took me wherever it wanted to take me. The 25-year progression of active alcoholism in my life, I developed this kind of a credo of living. It said, any means justifies the ends. Whatever I perceived it was that I needed to fill this missing hole inside of me, I went about the business of getting it no matter what the consequences. If I perceived I needed more money to fill up what was missing inside of me, I went about the business of making more money, and I ignored the constraints that were imposed upon the way I'm supposed to do business by the law. I became, in every area of my life, a liar and a cheat and a thief. If I perceived, Susan and I got married in 1960. And if I perceived that I needed more love or sex to make me happy, I went about the business of getting it, ignoring the constraints on my behavior imposed by my marriage vows. And I brought the terrible, crippling affliction of infidelity into our marriage. I became a part-time dad. We had 2 kids, Steve and Linda. I became an absentee husband and a part-time father. I'd go out and I'd drink all week, and I'd come home filled with guilt and shame and remorse, and I'd take it out on Susan and the kids in verbal and mental abuse. My dad had died in 1968, and I blamed him for all my troubles. I blamed him for the way that it had been in our home. My mother lived about 10 minutes away, and I didn't speak to her. I guess I blamed her for my dad. I had a brother that worked in this little family construction business, and I thought he was a leech and a drag on my happiness, and I resented him. My life, we've heard these words from speaker after speaker. My life was one of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization by 1980. Susan, in self-preservation mode, had gone to work, and she had a little photography studio in this little town of 3,000 or 4,000 people where we lived. She had a lady working for her named Joyce. Joyce, I like Joyce. Her husband John worked with me in this highway construction thing, and we'd get together socially. And Joyce and I'd go out in the kitchen to fix drinks, and we'd have 3 shooters and make 4 mixed drinks and take them out and watch John and Susan watch the ice cube melts, and we'd chug ours down and go back in the kitchen and have 3 shooters and make. She was fun to be around. And then she did the dumbest thing. New Year's Eve, 1979, in an alcoholic blackout, she tried to kill herself. Fortunately, she wasn't successful. But then she did this really ridiculous thing. She started going to this outfit called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, by this time, I had a little business interest in Denver, Colorado. It's about 300 miles away. And I was running away from home every week to go out there to get drunk and do the things that I do when I get drunk in Denver, to live this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of life that I know so many of you know about. I'd left to go out there I told Susan I'd be back in a day one time, and I came back a week and a half later and found all my clothes on the front porch. And she said, well, you either got to go to marriage counseling or you've got to move out. And we didn't want anybody to know there was anything wrong in Camelot, so we'd get on our little airplane every week and fly to Wichita, the other direction, 250 miles, to see this marriage counselor. One day he said to me, does your drinking cause trouble at home? And I said, are you the dumbest counselor in the world? She comes in here and talks to you for an hour every week. You know it causes trouble at home. And I think what he said to me is, then why do you drink? But what I heard him say is, why do you drink at home? And I thought, that's a heck of a good question. I've got this little business in Denver, and I can maybe make it 3 or 4 days in Ulysses without drinking, and then I can fly away and do my drinking and what I do when I drink in Denver. And that was the life that I had in 1980. And I'd gone to work, and the phone rang, and it was Susan, and she said, Joyce and I told her I was going to Denver on business. And she called and said, Joyce and I need to go to Denver with you. We'll meet you at the airport. And I guess, you think about it, the last 2 people in the world I wanted to go with me to Denver, Colorado, were my wife, for obvious reasons, because I've told you about the kind of life that I lived, and this goofy woman that had just joined Alcoholics Anonymous and wasn't drinking anymore. And I could normally have come up with 10 reasons in 5 seconds why they couldn't go. And I guess this was my first indication that the end was almost near, because I just said, okay, I'll meet you at the airport. And we got in the plane and flew to Denver and checked into a little Holiday Inn where I kept a room. And I don't know what they did. They went off to do whatever they came for, and I went to the bar, and that's the last thing I remember about the 20th day of February of 1980. I woke up the next morning in that hotel room, and I knew where I was because I woke up, I came to there a lot. And then I realized something was really wrong because Susan was there. And I got up, and I still had on the dirty shirt that I'd had on the day before. And she woke up and ordered some coffee. And I guess she called Joyce's room and asked her to come down and have coffee with us because I'm wearing the clothes I had on the night before, and I've got my arms around this coffee cup, and I'm shaking so bad I can't drink it because the coffee's all pouring down my dirty shirt. And someone knocks on the door, and Susan opens the door, and Joyce comes bounding into the room with her bright, clear little AA eyes, you know. And she says, "Good morning, Don, how are you?" And you've heard other speakers talk about it. Peter talked about it eloquently. And this was my moment of truth. This was my wimpy moment of truth. I said, "Joyce, I'm not worth a damn." And Tammy, I think, last night referred to Wino Joe. Wino Joe's the first AA speaker I ever heard. Wino Joe used to say, Joyce answered me with these words. She said, "Don, I know how you feel." And Wino Joe used to say the 5 magic words of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know how you feel. And I can't believe it. I heard myself saying, "Joyce, would you tell me something about this thing you're doing called Alcoholics Anonymous?" And then what happened, my friends, is that, you see, God not only sent me an angel, he sent her on a cloud because it started snowing right then. And we couldn't fly back. And Susan sat there for the next 24 hours and listened to Joyce tell me about AA, we talked about drinking and not drinking, and she shared with me, a guy who thought I was doomed. She shared with me that she had found a way up and out. Now, last night at the countdown, when we got to the 3-month point, there were still a lot of you out there standing up. And please keep in mind that Joyce had been in Alcoholics Anonymous since January the 1st, and this was the 21st day of February. If someone had to be sober a long time, if someone had to have done all 12 steps, if someone had to know all 12 traditions, if someone had to be able to recite the 12 concepts of service to